You've spent your life trying to be liked, changing the way you speak, adjusting your silences, measuring every gesture, choosing each word as if it were a key that could unlock closed hearts. And still, after all those efforts, you've felt invisible. That's the truth few dare to admit. The more you try to attract, the further you drift from yourself. Because need has a scent, the desire for approval is heavy, and the human soul isn't drawn to those who seek to be chosen but to those who have already chosen themselves. Never say this. Never say, "What do I have to do to make them like me?" Because in that question, you've already surrendered your power. Attraction isn't something you create, it's something you radiate. It's not begged for, it's embodied. True magnetism doesn't come from effort, but from calm. From that serenity that belongs to those who don't need to convince anyone, who don't compete for attention, who are simply at peace with who they are. The wise don't chase. They walk with purpose, and their presence alone makes the world stop for a moment. What truly attracts is not rehearsed words, clever phrases, or carefully calculated gestures. What attracts is coherence. It's the feeling that behind your gaze there's control, not lack. That your silence isn't emptiness, but containment. That your words have weight because you don't speak to fill space. That energy is what Stoicism calls temperance, the art of ruling yourself, even in the midst of emotion. Think of the calm that belongs to someone who doesn't seek to impress but to understand, who listens more than they speak, who doesn't fear silence because they trust their presence. That kind of person doesn't need to demand attention, they receive it effortlessly, not because they are superior, but because they project balance. And in a world where everyone fights to be heard, serenity becomes a luxury. External noise is only a reflection of inner noise. The anxiety to be liked comes from the fear of not being enough. But when that fear fades, when you realize you don't need validation to feel worthy, something changes within you. Your gestures slow down, your voice steadies, your gaze clears. You begin to attract not because you're trying to, but because you radiate a different kind of energy, the kind that comes from not fearing loss. That's the essence of Stoic attraction. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." If your thoughts revolve around being accepted, you project anxiety. If they revolve around living with virtue, you project peace. Real attractiveness comes from character, not performance. And character is formed when you stop acting to please and start acting from authenticity. Most people mistake silence for weakness, pause for indecision, humility for lack of power. But the wise know that silence can be a weapon, pause can command a room, and humility is the most elegant form of authority. That's why those who master their impulse to speak impress more than those who try to fill every gap with words. Stoic attraction isn't about technique, it's about vibration. It's in the tone of your presence, the clarity of your mind, the ease with which you inhabit your own body. Epictetus taught, "No one can make you feel inferior without your consent." Once you understand that, you stop competing. There's no need to prove anything. Because those who know their worth don't explain it, they embody it. Think back to the last time you were drawn to someone deeply. It wasn't because of what they said, but how they said it. How they held your gaze, how their movements were calm, how they seemed in control, even in uncertainty. That's the magic of serenity. It communicates more than any speech. Stoicism teaches that power doesn't lie in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. Attraction isn't about being desired, it's about being respected. And respect only appears when there's harmony between what you think say, and do. In that silent balance, a kind of magnetism is born, one that can't be faked. The modern world pushes you toward the opposite. It tells you to talk more, show more, say more. To explain your emotions, justify your intentions, leave no room for mystery. But the soul doesn't fall in love with excess, it falls in love with pause, with the mystery that hints without revealing, with that intelligence that can be felt even when unspoken. Never say this. Why didn't they text me? Why won't they look at me? What did I do wrong? Because those questions are born from lack. The wise don't ask why they aren't being sought. They ask whether they've sought themselves. Because when you find yourself, you no longer need to be found. When you recognize yourself, you stop craving recognition. Seneca wrote, "No wind is favorable to the pattern, one who doesn't know where he's going." If you don't know who you are, you'll search for attention in every port. But once you know your direction, the wind stops mattering. There's nothing more attractive than a mind at peace with itself, because it radiates direction, and direction is magnetic. Serenity is the subtlest form of power. You can't always see it, but you can feel it. Those who have it don't declare it. It's reflected in their eyes, their movements, the way they occupy space without trying to dominate it. That serenity can't be bought, it's cultivated. It's not improvised, it's trained. It's born from hours of introspection, of learning to be alone, of observing your thoughts without fighting them. Stoic attraction grows from emotional mastery, from not being shaken when you're misunderstood, from not insisting when you're not chosen, from not justifying yourself when you're judged. It's the art of staying firm without becoming hard, of being kind without surrender, of being clear without aggression. Those who achieve this become magnetic because they represent something rare: balance. That's why many misunderstand the allure of the wise, because they don't chase, yet they attract. They don't explain, yet they're understood. They don't promise, yet they deliver. In a world that rewards noise, their silence is a revolution. This episode isn't about techniques of seduction, it's about presence. About learning to communicate without excess, to connect without anxiety, to care without control, to master your energy so it speaks for you, because those who master their energy master their environment. In the lessons ahead, you'll discover 10 simple yet powerful principles that will transform how you connect with others. They're not formulas for attraction, they're foundations for self-control. Every phrase, every pause, every boundary will become a tool to help you attract from mastery, not from need. Remember this before you continue. Calm isn't passivity, it's power. Silence isn't distance, it's wisdom. Slowness isn't weakness, it's precision. Those who master these three languages, calm, silence, and precision, become magnetic, not for what they say, but for what they embody. So listen closely, because what you're about to learn isn't how to impress the world, it's how to stop needing to. Because the soul that no longer seeks to be seen shines effortlessly. Never say this, "How can I make them choose me?" Instead say, "How can I become someone who doesn't need to be chosen to feel complete?" And in that question begins true attraction. First Stoic principle, genuine curiosity. Tell me more about that. It sounds simple, almost harmless, but when spoken calmly, it can disarm anyone. Because in a world where everyone wants to be heard, the one who truly listens becomes unforgettable. Genuine curiosity isn't a strategy, it's presence. It doesn't seek to gain something, it seeks to understand. It doesn't aim to conquer, but to connect. And that difference is the line between manipulation and true magnetism. The human soul senses intention before it hears words. That's why, when you're genuinely interested in someone, they feel it. They sense that your attention isn't born of a need to impress, but from the serenity of someone who isn't in a rush. The wise listen without interrupting, ask without invading, observe without judging. That way of being active silence creates an energy that cannot be faked. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly for the art of attraction. When you speak, let your words be better than silence. That's the key. Genuine curiosity doesn't fill silence out of anxiety. It fills it with meaning. It doesn't ask to please but to discover. It doesn't rely on rehearsed lines but on the authenticity of presence. Yet we live in a time where almost no one listens. Everyone is waiting for their turn to speak, thinking about what to say while the other is still talking. That impatience is the noise that kills connection. Because when you don't listen, the other person feels it. They feel you're not there, that your interest is shallow, that your eyes are searching for something beyond their words. Stoicism teaches us to live in the present, and listening is the most practical way to do so. To listen without a plan, without an agenda, without expectation. To listen not to reply, but to understand. Genuine curiosity is the most elegant form of self-mastery, because it requires what few possess: patience. Seneca said, 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak. It's not just good manners, it's wisdom strategy. A person who listens attentively radiates calm, because someone who doesn't need to interrupt shows that their mind is at peace, that they're not competing, that they don't need to dominate. And that peace is felt, that energy attracts. Genuine curiosity is also a form of humility. It's admitting you don't know everything, that others can teach you something, that every conversation is an opportunity to learn. Arrogance wants to prove, wisdom wants to discover. When you ask calmly, you project intelligence, not the kind from books, but the emotional intelligence of knowing when to be silent and when to make room for someone else. When you approach others without trying to gain, the balance of the relationship shifts. You're no longer a force that pushes, you're a presence that welcomes. You're not seeking acceptance, you're simply observing. And in that serene observation, something priceless appears: trust. Trust cannot be demanded, it's inspired. And it's inspired when the other person feels you're not performing. Think of the last time someone truly listened to you. They didn't interrupt, correct, or advise. They were simply there, attentive, silent. Do you remember how that felt? That kind of presence leaves a mark. Not because it offered solutions, but because it made you feel seen effortlessly. That's what genuine curiosity gives others, the feeling of being understood without having to explain. The Stoic doesn't listen to respond, but to understand the nature of things. In doing so, he becomes a patient observer of the human soul. He doesn't need to speak much, his gaze already communicates understanding. The calm of the wise invites others to open up. And that openness is the ground where the deepest kind of attraction grows, emotional connection. But genuine curiosity can't be faked. The anxious mind asks to control. The serene mind asks to learn. The difference is immense. When you ask from anxiety, others sense you're seeking approval. When you ask from calm, they sense you're seeking truth. The tone of your voice, the rhythm of your silence, the light in your eyes, everything reveals your intent. Epictetus taught that nothing is more powerful than knowing the limits of your control. Listening is the acceptance of those limits. You can't control what others feel, but you can choose how you approach their world. Approaching it with genuine curiosity is a form of respect. It silently says, "Your perspective matters to me not because it matches mine, but because it exists." That humility, that openness, is one of the purest forms of attraction. The allure of the wise doesn't come from speech, but from attention, because in a society that glorifies display, attention has become rare. And what's rare becomes valuable. When you listen calmly, you not only stand out, you disarm. No one can defend themselves against kind silence. No one can resist being understood. Listening with curiosity is also an act of power, the power of self-control. The natural impulse of the mind is to fill the void, to speak, to justify, to decorate. But those who master silence master interaction. Their calm commands respect. Their gaze, free of judgment, radiates what few possess, inner security. You don't need to be the most interesting person to attract. You need to be the most present. The wise don't control conversations, they guide them gently. They ask simple but profound questions. They leave spaces where the other can unfold. And in that space, connection arises, not because it's forced, but because it's allowed. Marcus Aurelius understood this. What we hear is an opinion, not a fact. What we see is a perspective, not the truth. The wise listen knowing that what they hear is partial, not a threat. That's why they don't defend themselves. That's why they can listen even to things they dislike without agitation. Genuine curiosity comes from acceptance, not judgment. When you practice this way of being, something in you begins to shift. People open up more, trust more, seek you out without knowing why. It's not magic, it's energy. You're practicing the highest form of attention, the one that doesn't judge or compete. And that kind of attention creates natural, silent, irresistible magnetism. The Stoic knows that listening to others is also listening to himself. What irritates you shows your limits. What moves you reveals your values. Every dialogue becomes a mirror, and those who can look into those mirrors calmly become wiser, more magnetic, more human. So next time you speak with someone, don't aim to say the right thing. Aim to understand what's true. Ask without hurry. Observe without fear. Be interested not to be remembered, but to remind others that someone still listens without expecting anything. Tell me more about that. Spoken calmly, that phrase can turn a conversation into a bond, a fleeting moment into respect, and an ordinary encounter into an experience the other will never forget. Because in the end, genuine curiosity doesn't seduce with words, it seduces with presence. And whoever masters presence masters the art of attracting without saying too much. Second Stoic principle, quiet honesty. I don't know. 3 words many are afraid to say. In a world where everyone tries to appear as an expert, admitting ignorance feels like failure. But the Stoic knows that saying, "I don't know," doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Because those who always need to be right live enslaved by others' opinions, while the wise, by accepting their limits, become untouchable. Quiet honesty doesn't seek to impress, it seeks to be consistent. And that consistency is magnetic. Most people fake certainty to protect their ego. They fear that doubt will make them less valuable, less admirable, less desirable. But doubt, when embraced calmly, is a sign of intelligence. Only someone deeply self-aware can admit ignorance without losing dignity. That transparency inspires more respect than any speech filled with artificial confidence. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." Hidden within that line is a silent kind of power, because whoever isn't afraid to appear ignorant frees themselves from the social game of appearances. They stop building an image to please others and begin to live from authenticity. And authenticity in human relations is gold. Quiet honesty isn't about confessing everything or baring your soul to anyone. It's about speaking truth without drama or exaggeration, saying what's necessary with firmness, and leaving room for silence. The wise don't need to justify every word. They speak with precision and stay silent with elegance. Their sincerity isn't impulsive, it's deliberate. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Never be ashamed of needing help. What would shame you is refusing it." The Stoic mind understands that there's no dishonor in not knowing. The real disgrace is pretending you do and then falling because of pride. So when a wise person says, "I don't know," they don't lose authority, they gain it. Because their voice comes not from ego, but from truth. Quiet honesty is the most refined form of power. It doesn't need to raise its tone, persuade, or decorate. It communicates with a clarity that disarms. Those who speak truth without tension project mastery, because anyone at peace with their truth doesn't need to defend it. By contrast, those who lie, exaggerate, or brag live on alert. Their mind wastes energy maintaining a false image. That tension shows in their eyes, in their voice, in their gestures. The body can't carry the weight of falsehood for long, but those who live honestly move lightly. To speak truth is to rest. It's to release the weight of pretending. The allure of the wise lies there in the serenity of someone who doesn't perform, who doesn't say what others want to hear, but what their conscience approves. That clarity earns respect, even from those who disagree, because the human soul recognizes truth even when it resists it. Quiet honesty doesn't always please, but it always leaves a mark. Seneca warned, "Nothing is more honorable than a grateful heart." But he could have added, "Nothing is more admirable than an honest mind." Gratitude connects you to life. Honesty connects you to yourself. When you speak truth, even the silence that follows becomes pure because there's no inner noise, no dissonance. Quiet honesty also demands courage, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that holds its truth without forcing it on anyone. It's easy to speak truth in anger. It's hard to do it calmly. It's easy to be sincere when you're winning. Admirable is being sincere when you risk losing. Serenity and truth is the mark of emotional mastery. Picture a conversation where someone tries to impress you. They speak endlessly, exaggerating, filling the air with big words. Now picture someone else who listens, smiles gently, and simply says, "I'm not sure about that." The second person doesn't compete or seek attention, yet their presence commands the room, because the silence that follows those words carries more weight than any speech. That's quiet honesty in action. Don't mistake this calm for passivity or lack of opinion. The Stoic doesn't stay silent out of fear, but out of wisdom. They speak when their words can build, and stay silent when speaking would only feed noise. That's the difference between wanting to be heard and wanting to contribute, and that difference, once felt, earns respect. Marcus Aurelius advised, "Speak only what is necessary, and speak it naturally." That naturalness is the fruit of self-mastery. When you stop trying to impress, your words flow with a grace that ego can never imitate. You don't need to prove your worth, you embody it. Being honest also means knowing when not to respond. Sometimes silence is the most honest answer. When someone tries to provoke, manipulate, or drag you into a pointless argument, the wise don't enter. Not because they lack arguments, but because they know silence can be clearer than 1,000 explanations. Quiet honesty isn't about telling all the truth, it's about telling the necessary truth. Measuring that requires discernment, and discernment comes from introspection. The wise ask themselves before speaking, does this come from ego or from conscience? If it's ego, they remain silent. If it's conscience, they speak without fear. Epictetus taught, "Speech is like a sword, it must be used with great care. A truth spoken with arrogance wounds, spoken with serenity it teaches." The way you deliver truth defines its impact. That's why your tone reveals more about you than your content. Truth without temperance becomes aggression. Truth with calm becomes wisdom. Quiet honesty attracts because it's rare. Most people fear being truthful out of fear of losing approval. But when you meet someone who doesn't aim to please, only to be faithful to themselves, their energy feels different. They need no embellishment, no filter, no strategy. Their authenticity acts as a mirror, forcing others to confront their own masks. And though uncomfortable, it's profoundly magnetic. The Stoic doesn't care about seeming interesting, they care about being integral. They know superficial interest fades, but integrity endures. Their calm becomes their calling card, their serenity, their magnetism. They don't seek to convince anyone of their worth, they show it in every silence, every measured word, every coherent choice. Being honest in a world that rewards appearances is an act of rebellion, but a silent, elegant, unshakable one. It's holding someone's gaze without lowering your own. It's saying, "I don't know," when everyone else pretends to be wise. It's admitting vulnerability without drama. It's choosing clarity even when it stings. And that coherence doesn't just attract, it transforms. Next time you feel the urge to fake, exaggerate, or embellish to be accepted, remember this. Every lie pulls you further from yourself. Every truth, spoken calmly, brings you closer to your center. You don't need to know everything to be respected. You need to be genuine to be remembered. Because authenticity isn't a tactic, it's a frequency. And when you vibrate at that frequency, you attract those who value it too. What you fake will attract the false. What you are will attract the real. Saying, "I don't know," doesn't make you less, it makes you credible. It makes you human. And the human being who is at peace with themselves will always be irresistible. Third Stoic principle, restrained empathy. That must have been hard. 5 words that promise no solutions, seek no spotlight, and try not to shine. They simply acknowledge another person's weight without taking it from them. That's the essence of restrained empathy. To accompany without absorbing, to understand without invading, to be present without losing yourself. It's the wisdom of knowing that another's pain doesn't need to be fixed, it just needs to be seen. Sometimes, the most healing thing isn't saying something brilliant, but holding silence with respect. The world is full of voices wanting to be right, but almost empty of presences that can listen with a still heart. Everyone wants to advise, but few want to understand. Everyone wants to be the savior, but almost no one wants to be the witness. Restrained empathy doesn't aim to save, it aims to honor the process. It's the gaze of the wise that, without words, says, "I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to stand by you while you rebuild yourself." Marcus Aurelius wrote, If someone does you wrong, it's likely out of ignorance. Understanding that changes everything, because restrained empathy doesn't grow from sentimentality, but from comprehension. It's not pity, it's clarity. When you can see the wound behind the wound, the reaction behind the offense, you stop judging and begin to understand. And those who understand don't react, they respond with serenity. But restrained empathy isn't weakness. It doesn't mean tolerating everything or absorbing others' pain until you're empty. It means staying centered, even when someone else is falling apart. It's the art of being near without losing yourself. Because if you break every time someone suffers, your help stops being presence and becomes a burden. The Stoic knows he cannot heal the world, but he can be present without being contaminated by its pain. Epictetus taught, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The same applies to another's pain. You can't erase someone's emotional burden, but you can offer a different perspective, a calm that becomes contagious, not through speech, but through energy. The wise don't preach, they demonstrate. They don't advise from noise, but from the quiet that comes from not feeling threatened by another's suffering. Restrained empathy requires emotional maturity. The ego's impulse is to intervene, to say, "I know how you feel," as if that could close the wound. But it doesn't. Sometimes that phrase divides instead of unites, because truthfully, you never know exactly how someone feels. You can only be there, offer presence, and hold space. Calm, in those moments, is worth more than any words. Seneca wrote, "The wise man doesn't complain about fate, he accepts it." Translated emotionally, empathy isn't about suffering with someone, but accepting that suffering is part of the human journey. You're not obliged to solve it, but you are obliged not to run from it. Restrained empathy means holding space so the other person can hear themselves without feeling judged. Some seek attention, others seek comfort. But deep down, everyone seeks understanding, not the analytical kind, but the kind that welcomes. Restrained empathy is understanding that doesn't invade. It's a look that says, "I see you," without adding, "Now let me fix you." And paradoxically, that's what heals most. Those who practice this kind of empathy learn when to step in and when to stay silent. Sometimes the greatest help is shared silence. Other times, it's a simple question, "What do you need right now?" That question assumes nothing. It doesn't impose solutions. It invites the other to reconnect with their own power. Because true empathy doesn't infantilize, it empowers. Marcus Aurelius understood this when he said, "The soul becomes stronger by enduring." You can't protect others from their own growth. Intervening too much steals their chance to grow stronger. Restrained empathy honors that autonomy. It's the perfect balance between compassion and respect. And though it seems simple, it's one of the hardest forms to practice. Because it requires letting go of the savior's ego. It means accepting that you can walk with someone without being the reason they change. It demands surrendering the need to control the outcome. To love calmly is not to promise healing, but to promise to remain. The Stoic who practices restrained empathy doesn't get swept away by others' emotions, nor do they harden themselves against them. They maintain a sacred distance, close enough to see clearly, far enough not to disconnect. They know real connection doesn't come from emotional overflow, but from balance. Epictetus would say that empathy without control is compassion without virtue, and compassion without virtue becomes a burden. So when someone cries before you, You don't need to cry too to show understanding. Sometimes it's enough to stay still, hold their gaze, and offer the calm they've lost. That serenity can be more healing than 1,000 pieces of advice. Think about the times you tried to be the savior. In trying to understand, you ended up drained. In trying to calm someone else, you lost your peace. That's the boundary restrained empathy teaches. To accompany without absorbing. Another's pain can touch you, but it must not possess you, because when you become a mirror of chaos, you can no longer offer calm. Seneca warned that he who lets himself be dragged down by another's misfortune only multiplies misfortunes. True compassion doesn't catch the fear, it becomes an example of composure. And that composure inspires more than any words. When someone sees you can stay by their side without losing your center, something in them begins to settle. Calm is contagious. Restrained empathy also has a quiet side that few understand: the ability to withdraw without guilt. To know when your presence no longer helps but sustains destructive patterns. Leaving isn't abandonment. It's trust that the other can rise too. The wise don't stay where they can no longer bring peace, because they know compassion without boundaries becomes useless sacrifice. This kind of empathy, when mastered, grants a different kind of authority. You no longer need to speak loudly to influence. The way you look, listen, and remain still communicates balance. And balance attracts not romantically or superficially, but profoundly, because the human soul feels safe next to someone who doesn't lose their center. Marcus Aurelius, who knew loss, betrayal, and loneliness, wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." Applied to empathy, it means don't respond to chaos with chaos, or to pain with despair. Respond with calm. Calm doesn't ignore its supports. Calm doesn't deny it illuminates. Calm doesn't save it inspires. And that inspiration is the highest form of attraction. Because human beings don't seek perfection, they seek refuge. And those who master restrained empathy become that refuge. An emotional space without judgment, filled with silence, understanding, and presence. Learning to say, "I know that must hurt," without adding, "Let me tell you how to fix it," is one of the greatest signs of emotional maturity. You don't need answers, you need calm. Calm is the invisible medicine every broken heart recognizes. The Stoic practices restrained empathy not only toward others, but toward themselves. It's about observing your own emotions without overreacting, allowing yourself to feel without dramatizing, consoling yourself without lying. That's the hardest empathy of all, the one you practice with yourself when you fail, when you don't understand, when you can't go on. The inner voice that doesn't humiliate or justify, but simply says, "I know it hurts, but you're still here." Restrained empathy is a subtle balance between heart and reason, neither coldness nor overflow, neither indifference nor fusion. It's the middle point where humanity flourishes without losing order. Because the soul that can accompany without drowning, understand without absorbing, and love without losing itself is not just wise, it's magnetic. And when you reach that point, when your presence soothes without words, you discover the essence of Stoic attraction. That emotional mastery doesn't reject emotion, it ennobles it. That calm doesn't cool love, it matures it. And that empathy, when contained, doesn't fade, it becomes light. Fourth Stoic principle: silence with purpose. There are silences that kill, and silences that heal. Silences that destroy trust, and silences that build respect. Silence isn't the absence of words, it's the presence of mastery. What separates one kind from the other isn't volume, but intention, because those who stay quiet out of fear shrink, while those who stay quiet out of wisdom rise. Silence with purpose is a form of invisible power. Whoever masters their impulse to speak also masters how others perceive them. We live in an age where everything is said, where noise seems synonymous with existence. People speak without thinking, opine without understanding, react without breathing. Amid all that noise, silence has become an act of rebellion. The Stoic understands this. A mind that doesn't need to fill the air with words transmits something the modern world has forgotten: inner authority. Marcus Aurelius wrote with the serenity of one who knows his strength, "Speak not everything you think, but think everything you speak." That is the foundation of silence with purpose. It isn't muteness or indifference, it's emotional strategy. The wise don't speak to win, they speak to contribute. They don't stay silent out of weakness, they do so out of respect for their own energy. And in that silent balance, a form of magnetism is born that cannot be faked. Silence with purpose isn't withdrawal, it's awareness. It's the art of measuring words and letting the air between them say what the voice doesn't need to. Because when someone masters the pause, when they don't react to provocation, when they choose to wait before responding, their presence becomes unpredictable. And unpredictability is power. Epictetus taught his students that the mind should be like a fortress, nothing enters or leaves without permission. That's the basis of purposeful silence. It's not only about not speaking, it's about deciding what deserves your words. Speaking less doesn't make you mysterious, it makes you selective. And in that conscious selectiveness, you project something rare: control. Seneca, with his usual clarity, said, "Talking too much is a sign of weakness. The wise man speaks little and with precision." Hidden in that line is a deep truth. Excessive words are an attempt to compensate for what character cannot sustain. When your presence has weight, you don't need to explain so much. Your silences begin to speak for you, saying what your lips no longer need to. But silence with purpose isn't a mask. It's not about pretending calm or using silence as manipulation. It's about inhabiting it, understanding it, recognizing its value as a space where the soul breathes and thought aligns. It's the silence that precedes an intelligent response, not the one that punishes or intimidates. Many mistake silence for distance, but the wise know it can be connection. Because when you stay quiet from calmness, others feel heard. When you don't interrupt, you create space for truth to surface on its own. When you don't respond instantly, you teach that not everything deserves an immediate reaction. That pause isn't coldness, it's respect. Respect for yourself, for others, and for the moment. Think of how many times one extra word ruined what silence had already solved. How many times you spoke impulsively and regretted it later. Silence, when used well, saves you from regret, but it requires discipline. The mind hates the void. It wants to fill every gap. The wise train in the discomfort of not speaking until it stops being discomfort and becomes power. Epictetus insisted, "First, learn to be silent. Then, if necessary, learn to speak." The order isn't accidental. Mastery of speech is born from mastery of mind. Those who cannot stay silent cannot think, and those who cannot think end up speaking from ego, not from awareness. Silence with purpose begins in thought, when you choose what's worth expressing and what must stay inside to mature. Marcus Aurelius also warned, "The strong man is he who masters his tongue before it masters him." And that mastery isn't shown in grand declarations, but in the small, daily moments when you choose not to reply to a provocative message, when you decide not to enter a pointless argument, when you prefer to observe rather than explain. In those moments, your real wisdom is measured. There's a kind of presence that only silence can give you. It's the quiet authority of one who doesn't need to insist. The person who stays silent while everyone else is agitated creates a contrast so powerful it changes the entire room. Calm is contagious. But that kind of silence doesn't come from repression, it comes from understanding. You don't stay quiet because you can't speak. You stay quiet because you know that speaking now would waste your energy. Silence with purpose also reveals emotional maturity. The immature react. The mature respond, and sometimes not even that. They understand that time is the best argument, that actions say more than words, that truth doesn't need immediate defense because it stands on its own. Seneca advised, "Don't argue with those who seek victory, not truth." That line summarizes the art of wise silence. Because those who argue with fools become fools themselves. The wise prefer peace over being right, and their silence isn't surrender, it's inner triumph. They don't need to prove anything, because they've already won by keeping their composure. There are silences that wound, and silences that heal. The Stoic learns to distinguish them. They know when silence becomes avoidance, and when it becomes strength. When they stay quiet out of fear, they lose. When they stay quiet by choice, they rise. The difference can be felt because fearful silence shrinks, and disciplined silence expands. The power of silence also lies in its ability to reveal. When you stop talking, you start observing. And when you observe, you see what noise hides. Hidden motives, unspoken truths, the space between the lines. Silence becomes a mirror in which others reflect themselves without realizing it. And what you see there not only protects you, it enlightens you. But silence isn't just for others, it's also for you. The Stoic understands that within silence lies his most important conversation, the one with his own mind. Each day, a few moments of silence are enough to realign the soul. It's not decorative meditation, it's spiritual repair. It's the moment you stop speaking to yourself from fear and start listening from calm. Epictetus said, "Tranquility doesn't depend on external quiet, but on inner stillness. Practicing silence with purpose is building that stillness from within." It doesn't matter if outside there's chaos, voices, or demands. What matters is whether inside you can sustain a space untouched by noise. Purposeful silence is that refuge. The magnetism of someone who masters their silence is incomparable. They communicate mystery without artifice. Their calm intrigues, their gaze steadies, their presence fills the room effortlessly. They don't need to raise their voice, their energy already speaks. And that energy can't be faked, it's trained. Every pause you choose, every reaction you hold, every word you decide not to say, strengthens your invisible power. Marcus Aurelius affirmed, "What does not improve silence, it is better not to say." That is the measure of wisdom. Every word you utter should have a purpose to build, clarify, or console. If it doesn't, silence is the better answer. Those who live by that principle stop fearing pauses, because they know pauses also communicate. Silence with purpose doesn't impose, it influences. When you practice it, people around you start speaking differently, lowering their tone, breathing more slowly. Your calm organizes the room. Your presence sets the rhythm. Because silence, when born from awareness, harmonizes everything it touches. Not everyone will understand your silence. Some will call it coldness, others indifference. But the wise don't need to be understood, only respected. And respect always comes, sooner or later, to those who don't betray themselves by speaking too much. Practicing silence with purpose doesn't mean withdrawing from the world. It means learning to live in it without being consumed by its noise. It means choosing when to speak, how to speak, and most importantly, when not to say anything at all. It means trusting that your worth isn't measured by the number of words you say, but by the quality of your presence, because those who master silence don't become invisible, they become unforgettable. And that is the most dangerous kind of power a calm soul can hold, the ability to attract without uttering a single word. Fifth Stoic principle: sincere appreciation. I value that in you. Few phrases carry such strength when spoken calmly. It isn't flattery, strategy, or currency to buy affection. It's truth spoken with elegance and restraint, expecting nothing in return. Sincere appreciation doesn't arise from a desire to please, it comes from the art of observation. And those who know how to observe with gratitude don't just recognize beauty in others, they reveal it within themselves. The modern world confuses praise with manipulation. People flatter to receive, recognize to please, admire to approach. But the wise don't use recognition as a tool of conquest, they use it as an expression of virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When someone does well, remember to acknowledge it immediately. Not to gain something, but to keep the soul free from envy." Because genuine appreciation not only illuminates others, it purifies your own mind. When you admire with serenity, you don't give away power, you share abundance. To recognize another's merit without feeling smaller is a sign of maturity. The insecure soul competes, the strong soul celebrates. And that pure celebration creates a kind of connection that needs no words. Those who receive your recognition feel it in your tone, your gaze, your pause. They sense no desire or calculation, only calm. Epictetus taught that the wise never fear admiration, for virtue is a shared reflection. What you recognize in another also lives in you. And when you do it without comparison, you expand. Sincere admiration is a noble mirror. It doesn't make you smaller, it reminds you of what you can become. Sincere appreciation also has rhythm. It's not scattered like petals in the wind, it's offered as a precise, intentional gesture. The voice of the wise doesn't flatter, it affirms. It doesn't exaggerate, it highlights the essential. Because empty praise dissolves into noise, but recognition born of true observation endures. I value that in you is more powerful than any speech, because it doesn't seek to control, it seeks to honor. Seneca said, "Gratitude is the memory of the heart." When you practice appreciation, you train that memory. You teach your mind to notice what works, not just what's missing. And that perspective reshapes not only your relationships, but your very way of being in the world. Calm begins to grow from gratitude, not from the absence of problems. Sincere appreciation also brings order to relationships. Those who know how to thank don't need to demand. Those who know how to recognize don't need to compete. And those who can see value in others without feeling threatened live in freedom. But those who cannot admire remain trapped in endless comparison. A mind that doesn't appreciate poisons itself with resentment. The Stoic knows that true greatness isn't measured by what you receive, but by what you recognize. In conversation, A simple gesture of appreciation can shift the entire tone. It can dissolve tension, create authenticity, and open genuine connection, because the human soul cannot resist being seen with respect. But for appreciation to be real, it must be selective. Not everything deserves admiration. The wise don't praise what is shallow or applaud what is merely popular. They recognize what is true, not what is trending. Admiration without discernment is just more noise. Sincere appreciation, however, is quiet, almost invisible. It's seen more in the gaze than in the words. Marcus Aurelius practiced a simple ritual. Each night, he wrote down 3 things he had appreciated that day, not only about people, but about life itself: a sunrise, a soldier's gesture, the way someone solved a problem. It was his Stoic exercise in gratitude, training his mind to see the good without denying the difficult. Repeated over time, it kept his spirit clear even in adversity. Sincere appreciation seeks no reward. The act itself is its own reward. Because every time you recognize virtue in someone else, your mind aligns with it. You connect with the beauty of character, the nobility of action, the serenity of example. And what you contemplate with admiration begins to shape you. Epictetus said, "You cannot be free unless you know whom to admire." To admire rightly is to choose your models in life, to align your moral compass toward what elevates, not what merely shines. False admiration confuses. Sincere admiration builds. The wise don't idolize, they respect. They don't imitate, they learn. They don't copy, they observe and transform. Sincere appreciation also holds a secret virtue. It strengthens silence. When you admire without needing to announce it, your presence deepens. You don't need to proclaim what you feel, your gaze says enough. People can sense when your recognition is real, because it isn't wrapped in desire. It's simple, clean, almost spiritual. Seneca warned that no good is pleasant if possessed without company. Sincere appreciation is that invisible company between souls that recognize each other. It doesn't matter if little is said, the connection lies in the quiet understanding of what is valuable. 2 people who appreciate each other calmly don't need validation, they just coexist. But sincere appreciation must also include yourself. You cannot see value in others if you refuse to recognize your own. Appreciating yourself isn't vanity, it's fairness. It's looking at your story with the same compassion you'd offer someone you admire. It's thanking yourself for surviving your storms. The wise don't boast, but they don't belittle themselves either. Their self-appreciation is discreet but unbreakable. When you learn to appreciate yourself, others' praise stops being fuel. You no longer need it to feel worthy, because your inner gratitude sustains you. That balance transforms your relationships. You stop seeking recognition and start offering it. You stop measuring what you receive and start valuing what you give. That is the alchemy of sincere appreciation. It turns need into abundance. Think of the energy that appears when someone tells you something kind, without exaggeration, without expectation. It feels different. It calms you. It inspires you. It makes you feel seen without feeling analyzed. That's the kind of admiration the world needs, the kind that doesn't weigh, doesn't demand, just illuminates. The Stoic isn't afraid to recognize virtue, even in adversaries. Because doing so doesn't weaken, it strengthens. To admire what is just, noble, or wise, even in those you dislike, is a test of mastery. It means your judgment isn't ruled by emotion but guided by reason, and that impartiality is the root of serenity. Marcus Aurelius practiced this faithfully. In his writings, he thanked both his teachers and those who criticized him. He saw lessons even in opposition. That mental breadth is the essence of sincere appreciation, to see light where others see only rivalry. A soul that lives in gratitude cannot be manipulated, because gratitude disarms envy, resentment, and fear. It's impossible to be both grateful and miserable. A grateful mind doesn't chase, it attracts. It doesn't demand, it inspires. It doesn't complain, it understands. Gratitude, therefore, is a silent form of intelligence. When sincere appreciation becomes habit, your presence becomes a refuge. Those who cross your path feel relief, not tension, because your energy doesn't take, it gives. And giving calmly is one of the purest forms of Stoic love, not the kind that seeks to possess, but the kind that celebrates others simply for existing. When you say, "I value that in you," from the soul, you don't flatter, you bless. You name what others overlook. And in that quiet act, you return something the ego has forgotten: the humility of recognition. Because sincere appreciation isn't a technique to please, it's a philosophy to live by. It's remembering that greatness multiplies when shared, that respect grows when expressed, and that admiring with serenity is wisdom in motion. The wise don't fear another's light because they know that when light is reflected, it doesn't fade, it expands. And when you learn to admire without feeling smaller, to praise without intent, to recognize without expectation, your presence becomes magnetic. Because in a world where everyone asks, you give, and what is given from calmness always returns multiplied. Sixth Stoic principle: elegant boundaries. I'd rather not talk about that. That simple phrase holds one of the most refined forms of power, because whoever can say it without guilt, tension, or excuses has mastered one of the soul's hardest virtues, the command of their own space. Elegant boundaries aren't walls, they're frames. They don't exist to exclude, but to protect inner harmony. And in a world where everyone seeks unlimited access to your mind, time, and energy, setting boundaries calmly has become an act of radical wisdom. The Stoic understands that not everything deserves a response, and not every question needs an answer. Calm doesn't mean accepting everything. It means knowing how to say no without losing composure. A boundary isn't rejection, it's self-knowledge. Marcus Aurelius expressed it perfectly: be like the frommers, not a blunt promontory against which the waves break. He didn't say to stop the sea, he said to stand firm without dissolving. That's the essence of the elegant boundary. Remaining steady without losing grace. Saying no may seem small, but in truth it's a philosophical declaration. It means, I know my limits, I value my energy, and I will not sacrifice my peace to please those who don't understand my rhythm. It means you've stopped living for the approval of others, that your calm matters more than your reputation. Epictetus taught that he who cannot say no to himself will become a slave to others. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's freedom. It's remembering that your attention is sacred and finite. Every time you give it away carelessly, you lose a piece of yourself. But when you learn to direct it, your inner world becomes ordered. And that order is visible in your voice, in your posture, in the way you look without fear and speak without anxiety. Elegant boundaries aren't enforced with hardness, they're expressed with serenity. Power that comes from control doesn't need volume. Saying, I'd rather not talk about that, without justification or offense is emotional mastery. It's the balance between firmness of character and gentleness of manner. You don't seek to dominate, you seek to preserve. And in that quiet act, you become respectable. Seneca warned that not everything offered should be accepted. The wise don't fear disappointing those who demand what they cannot give, because they know that pleasing everyone is self-betrayal. Elegant boundaries aren't drawn against others, but in favor of integrity. They're reminders that you don't have to explain everything or justify every choice. Respect isn't begged, it's projected. There's a false idea that love means allowing everything, but love without limits turns into servitude. The Stoic loves from freedom, not fusion. They know that giving, without measure, isn't virtue, it's loss. Protecting your space doesn't mean closing your heart, it means keeping it free from resentment. Those who give without control end up drained. Those who set boundaries elegantly can keep giving without exhaustion. The elegant boundary also applies to dialogue. You don't need to enter every conversation or every conflict. Most debates don't seek understanding, they seek validation, and the wise refuse to play that game. Epictetus advised avoiding discussions where truth isn't the goal but victory, because in such places, even when you win, you lose. Setting limits on words is also a form of temperance. Practicing elegant boundaries doesn't mean isolation, it means choosing your sharing point. Not every feeling deserves exposure. Not every closeness is healthy. The wise reveal themselves without overflowing. They speak clearly, but not excessively. Transparency without prudence turns into unnecessary vulnerability. And the Stoic soul isn't afraid to be seen. It simply chooses to be seen only by those who know how to guard its silence. Marcus Aurelius understood. Tranquility comes from not depending on what you cannot control. Your boundaries are the line between what you can and cannot manage. You can't control others' expectations, but you can control how much of yourself you give to them. You can't prevent someone from questioning you, but you can decide whether their opinion enters your mind or stays outside. That filter is what separates serenity from chaos. Setting limits isn't a cold act, it's an act of love. Because it preserves your energy so you can offer it more purely. When you say no to what drains you, you're saying yes to what builds you. And that coherence is felt. People may not understand it at first, but they respect it eventually. Because respect is born of example, not explanation. Epictetus compared the mind to a garden. If you don't watch who enters, what once bloomed will soon wither. Your boundaries are the fence protecting your serenity from the invasion of others' noise. You don't need a high wall, just a clear gate. Not everyone should come in. Some should only be seen from afar. That doesn't make you cruel, it makes you wise. Elegant boundaries also apply to time. Knowing when to leave a conversation, a relationship, an idea. The wise don't fear empty spaces. They know absence can be more dignified than insistence. Sometimes the most powerful act isn't staying, it's leaving without resentment, and doing so in silence. Seneca said, "He who promises much binds himself much." Elegant boundaries also mean promising less and fulfilling more. Not overloading yourself with commitments that only feed the ego's need to feel important. Because every time you say yes to what you don't want, you're saying no to your peace. Integrity begins with the courage to choose honestly. You don't need to defend your boundaries only to live them. Those who don't respect your no are the same ones who benefited from your yes without gratitude. You don't have to convince them, just remember, not everyone is ready for your calm. And that's fine. The elegance of a boundary lies in the absence of drama, in calmly saying, "This doesn't serve me, and that's okay." Marcus Aurelius taught, "The best revenge is not to resemble your enemy." Applied to boundaries, it means you don't need to raise your voice or respond with the same force. Your dignity doesn't depend on others' understanding. It depends on not losing your own control. Each boundary set with calm is a silent declaration of strength. An elegant boundary is also a lesson for yourself. It's not only about saying no to others, but to your own mind. No to obsessive thoughts, no to destructive self-criticism, no to unnecessary guilt. Mastery begins within. You can't demand respect if you don't practice it in your own inner dialogue. The most important boundary is the one you draw against your mind when it tries to sabotage you. Practicing elegant boundaries is a path, not a technique. At first, it will hurt. You'll feel guilty for not pleasing, for not replying, for not explaining. But every time you hold firm in calm, guilt turns to respect, and respect to freedom. It's the price of living in alignment. Less external approval, more internal peace. Epictetus was right. No man is free who is not master of himself. Elegant boundaries are the living expression of that mastery. You don't rule others, you rule your space. And in that silent self-governance lies the seed of greatness. The wise aren't afraid to close a door. They know that what is meant for them doesn't need to be forced. What is right stays even when not held onto. And what leaves creates room for what must come. Saying, "I'd rather not talk about that," isn't avoidance, it's affirmation of freedom. It's the calm of one who no longer needs to prove anything, who understands that dignity stands stronger in silence than in explanation. And when you reach that point, when your boundaries arise not from fear but from clarity, you discover something profound. Setting limits doesn't push people away. It only removes those who never approached with respect. And what remains, what truly stays, is what's real. Seventh Stoic principle, the strategic pause. I'll think about it. 3 words that, when used well, reveal more strength than any immediate answer. Because the one who knows how to pause before speaking, deciding, or reacting shows a mastery few possess. The strategic pause is not indecision, it's wisdom in motion. It's the invisible moment when the soul consults reason before surrendering to impulse. And within that meditative silence, much of a person's destiny is decided. We live in an age of constant urgency. Everything must be solved now, answered in seconds, reacted to instantly. But the wise know that time is an ally, not an enemy. That haste belongs to fear, and calm belongs to mastery. When someone says to you, "Think fast," the Stoic smiles in silence, knowing that what's truly valuable withstands waiting. Epictetus taught that those who rush stumble over their own impulses. There is no worse counselor than anxiety. That's why the pause isn't a loss of time. It's an investment in clarity. It's the act of affirming, "I will not be a slave to the moment." The Stoic mind knows that every intense emotion, whether desire, anger, or enthusiasm, distorts perception. What feels urgent today dissolves tomorrow. What seems essential today reveals its triviality in time. Marcus Aurelius understood this well. Take a moment before reacting. Ask yourself if what disturbs you now will still matter tomorrow. That is the essence of the strategic pause. It isn't coldness, it's applied wisdom. The realization that life isn't won by speed, but by discernment. There's an invisible elegance in those who don't hurry. Their calm unsettles, their silence provokes. Because the world is addicted to instant answers and constant validation. When someone says, "I'll think about it," they disrupt the rhythm of the game. they reclaim control of time. And in the realm of relationships, decisions, or conflicts, whoever controls time controls energy. The strategic pause is a space of power, not because it manipulates, but because it observes. While others react, you watch. While others justify, you evaluate. While external noise demands an answer, you let clarity come on its own. And when you speak, each word carries weight because it's born from reflection, not reflex. Seneca said, "Nothing is lost by waiting except impatience." The strategic pause isn't passivity, it's precision. It's learning to distinguish between the moment to act and the moment to observe. And that distinction is what separates the wise from the impulsive. Think of the times you responded quickly just to avoid seeming indifferent. The moments you said yes out of fear of losing something or no out of pride. The pause would have protected you. Because in that brief breath before you speak, you can see your true motivations more clearly. Epictetus insisted that the mind must be trained like the body. Just as you don't throw your arm without technique, you shouldn't throw words without reason. Every pause is training one more repetition in the gym of consciousness. At first it hurts, because the ego wants to take the stage. But with practice, the pause becomes natural. The Stoic knows not every feeling must be expressed, not every thought deserves a voice. Emotion, if not settled, becomes error. That's why, in every tense conversation or crucial decision, the wise seek their breath not as superstition, but as recovery of control. Marcus Aurelius practiced pausing even in war. In the midst of reports and urgency, he asked for a moment to write, not as escape, but as grounding. He needed to remember that his mind must command before his sword. That habit saved him from countless mistakes. Because a pause, once habitual, protects even in chaos. In daily life, the strategic pause may seem like a luxury, but it's actually a form of respect for yourself, for others, and for truth. Because answering without thought is answering from a wound, not from reason. And every time you hold silence for just one more second, you choose to build instead of destroy. Seneca said plainly, "Words should be like coins, valuable and rare." The pause is the mint where those coins are made. Each second of silence before speaking purifies intention. It allows you to strip away excess, defense, vanity. And when you finally speak, your words no longer seek to win, they seek to serve. There is power in a measured rhythm. Those who don't rush transmit stability. Their presence slows time around them. And that sensation is magnetic. In personal connections, in business, in life itself, calm inspires trust. Because those who don't react instantly show they are not controlled by circumstance. Their axis is inner, not external. The strategic pause also teaches humility. Because in that brief silence, you admit you don't know everything, that you can think better, that it's worth observing before deciding. That humility protects you from error. You don't need the fastest answer, you need the right one. Epictetus warned, "When you speak, let your words be better than silence." If you can't improve silence, wait. That waiting isn't weakness, it's cultivation. In silence, understanding grows, emotion settles, intention sharpens. Each chosen pause is a seed of wisdom. Society pushes you to respond fast because it fears the pause. Silence makes the undisciplined uneasy. But the Stoic loves silence because in it he finds himself again. In the pause, the soul is cleansed of noise and the mind regains perspective. In arguments, the pause can be more powerful than any rebuttal. Those who don't respond to provocation teach, without words, that mastery isn't in winning, it's in keeping peace. Sometimes, silence isn't surrender, it's proof that not everything deserves your energy. The strategic pause is, often, the most elegant reply. Marcus Aurelius reflected, "What stands in the way becomes the way." The pause isn't an obstacle, it's redirected momentum. It's the instant when fire becomes light. In that moment, reaction transforms into clarity. That's why the wise aren't slow, they're precise. Practicing the strategic pause changes your energy. You become less predictable, more observant, more profound. You stop speaking impulsively and start listening with intention. You notice subtleties you once ignored. You learn to sense when someone seeks understanding or merely attention. Your discernment sharpens, and with it, your power. The pause also teaches you to live with discomfort, to not flee the emptiness between question and answer. That space is where emotional mastery grows. The impatient soul wants to fill silence. The trained mind inhabits it. In that dwelling, a different kind of confidence emerges, the confidence in yourself. Because those who can stop before reacting can change the course of their fate. It's no exaggeration. Every pause has prevented wars, breakups, resignations, and irreparable mistakes. Behind every ruined life is an uncontained impulse. Behind every wise life, a chosen pause. The Stoic knows that the pause isn't the absence of action, it's the most refined form of it. It's the decision to observe before deciding, to feel before speaking, to understand before judging. It's the purest manifestation of emotional intelligence, mastery over inner time. So when someone pressures you for a quick answer, smile, breathe. Remember that haste is the mask of fear, and you no longer act from fear, but from clarity. "I'll think about it" isn't an excuse, it's a boundary. It's the simplest way to remind the world that your mind isn't rented by others' urgency. And when you begin to live this way, when pause becomes your natural rhythm, your entire life changes tone. You are no longer the one chasing answers, you are the one letting them come. Because well-managed silence isn't emptiness, it's power at rest. And those who master their pause, master their destiny. Eighth Stoic principle, attentive presence. Look with attention, not with intention. That's the difference between connecting and controlling. Those who look with intention seek to obtain something: approval, interest, response. Those who look with attention simply are. Pure attention is a rare, almost sacred state. It's a form of love without desire, of interest without anxiety, of energy without possession. And it is, paradoxically, one of the most forgotten virtues of the modern world. Human beings no longer look, they scan. They don't listen, they wait for their turn to speak. They are not present. They are trapped in invisible webs of thoughts, screens, and memories. But the Stoic understands that without presence, there is no life, only noise. Marcus Aurelius wrote it as a prayer to himself. Concentrate every act as if it were the last of your life. He didn't say it with drama, but with depth. Being present is a form of eternity. It turns the ordinary into transcendence. Attentive presence is the art of returning to inhabit the moment, to feel the weight of a gaze, the texture of a word, the temperature of silence. It's observing without interpreting, without rushing ahead, without wanting the moment to be different. It's letting reality express itself before you interfere. And though it sounds simple, it requires a level of mastery that only practice can grant. Epictetus taught this from the humility of a slave who saw the world with lucidity. You are not disturbed by what you see, but by the interpretation you give it. Stoic attention is free of assumptions. It learns to see what is, not what it wishes to be. Because the distracted soul doesn't live the present, it comments on it. And in commenting, it loses it. When you are truly attentive, your energy changes. People feel it. You don't need to say much, your gaze says enough. Your calm becomes a language. In a world where everyone competes to speak, those who know how to listen become magnetic, not because of mystery, but because of presence. There's a story about Socrates that captures this perfectly. A young man once asked how he could become wiser. Socrates led him to a river, pushed his head under water, and held it there a few seconds past his limit. When the young man emerged gasping, Socrates said, "When you desire wisdom as much as you desired to breathe, then you will learn." Attention is like that breathing with the whole soul, being so devoted to the present that the rest of the world fades away. Most people don't pay attention, they judge. They judge while listening, plan their reply while the other speaks, compare what they hear to their own story. But Stoic attention isn't intellectual, it's moral. To listen with attention is to show respect. It's to say, without words, "Your existence deserves this complete moment of my mind." Seneca warned, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." The scattered mind finds no peace because it divides itself in all directions. Being present is a form of renunciation. You give up what isn't happening now. And that renunciation liberates. Because while you chase what was or what will be, the present, the only true space of power, slips through your fingers. Attentive presence doesn't demand tense concentration. It demands peaceful surrender. It's not military discipline, it's serene disposition. It means stopping the struggle with the moment, accepting its imperfection, its fleetingness, staying there even when it hurts, even when you don't understand, even when there's nothing to say. Because even in uncomfortable silence there's information, even in waiting there's a lesson. Marcus Aurelius practiced attention as a spiritual ritual. Each morning he reminded himself that the day would be hard, that he'd meet ingratitude, impatience, dishonesty. But he added something vital. "Even so, I will not let them steal my attention from what depends on me." It was his way of shielding his mind from external chaos. To be present isn't to ignore the world, it's to remain conscious within it. The Stoic observes but doesn't absorb, participates without losing his axis, listens without merging with another's emotion. His attention is like still water, it reflects but doesn't retain. And in that reflection, others see themselves clearly. That's why the truly present person becomes a refuge. Their calm doesn't judge it, understands. Epictetus said, "If you want to be invincible, don't concern yourself with what doesn't depend on you." And nothing depends less on you than another's thoughts, reactions, or interpretations, but your attention that depends entirely on you. Presence is the invisible border between serenity and confusion. In human relationships, authentic attention is rarer than love. Many claim to love, few truly see. Because to look without demand is to accept, and to accept without possession is to respect. Attention is the prelude to emotional freedom. When you learn to look at someone without wanting to change them, your love becomes wise. Attentive presence is also self-knowledge. When you're fully present, you notice the noise inside you, your thoughts, impulses, automatic judgments. Attention becomes a mirror, and what you see sometimes hurts. But that pain purifies it. reveals what you have yet to master. In Stoic practice, attention extends to everything, to eating, breathing, walking, thinking. Every ordinary act can become meditation when done with presence. Eating without checking your phone, breathing without rush, walking without destination, these small things are exercises in mastery. Because those who master the moment master life. Distraction is the disease of the modern soul. Its cure isn't isolation but observation, not shutting out the world, but learning not to dissolve in it. Stoic attention doesn't flee noise, it moves through it with serenity. Because the wise don't seek external silence, they cultivate internal stillness. Seneca advised practicing attention by asking 3 nightly questions. When did I lose myself today? Which conversation pulled me off center? Where was I fully present? That constant self-observation turns attention into habit, and habit into character. The modern world glorifies multitasking, but the human soul was made for unity. To be in one act at a time is to respect life and to rebel against collective distraction, because every instant of true presence is resistance against superficiality. Marcus Aurelius saw attention as a form of love for the cosmos. Love what happens to you, for that is life. To love what happens is to see it, and to see it is to be. The wise don't wait for perfect circumstances to focus. They turn imperfection itself into contemplation. They find beauty even in difficulty. Attention cannot be faked. The body betrays it. The eyes reveal when the mind is elsewhere. The voice changes when presence is real. That's why when someone truly listens, you know it. Not from what they say, but from how they look at you. That's the power of Stoic attention. Its strength is invisible but undeniable. Practicing attentive presence transforms your connections. Conversations deepen. Decisions become wiser. Life slows down and fills with meaning. Because you no longer react, you respond. You no longer survive time, you inhabit it. And those who inhabit their time don't merely age, they mature. Being present won't always be comfortable. Sometimes it means holding pain without escape, facing conflict without distraction, accepting uncertainty without avoidance. But that discomfort is growth. Every moment you choose to stay instead of flee strengthens your character. The Stoic doesn't chase calmness, they embody it. And that calm arises from attention. Because when you truly see the world as it is, the urge to change everything fades. You understand that life doesn't need your correction, only your lucid presence. Epictetus said, "There's no greater blindness than that of one who refuses to see." But you are no longer blind. You've learned to look. You've stopped using your eyes to confirm your beliefs and started using them to discover. That shift is the beginning of wisdom. Attentive presence won't promise a life without pain, but it promises clarity. And clarity, once sustained, becomes power. The power to discern, to act, to love without dependence. So look at everything with the calm of the wise, not with the haste of those who fear losing, but with the serenity of one who knows that everything that matters is happening right here, right now. Because life isn't waiting for you somewhere else, it's right where you are, waiting for you to truly see it. And when you do, when your gaze stops wanting and starts understanding, you'll uncover the secret that transforms all existence. The world doesn't belong to you, but you can belong to the moment. 9th Stoic principle: mature acceptance. You have the right to think that way. Few phrases reveal such inner mastery, because those who can say them without irony or resentment have crossed the border of ego and entered the realm of emotional freedom. Acceptance is not surrender, it is understanding. It's seeing the difference between what you can change and what simply is. And that understanding is the foundation of lasting peace. Mature acceptance does not come from conformity but from discernment. It is not resignation or weakness, but silent strength. The Stoic understands that fighting reality is a lost war, because reality doesn't move by whim but by law. Epictetus summed it up precisely. Do not seek for things to happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do, and your life will flow serenely. That sentence doesn't teach passivity, it teaches wisdom. Because what you accept frees you. What you resist pursues you. The human soul suffers more from denial than from pain itself. Rejecting what is creates friction, and that friction becomes mental noise. We tell ourselves, this shouldn't have happened. It can't be. Why me? But the Stoic knows that reality doesn't ask for opinions. The universe doesn't stop to ask permission before teaching you something. Everything that happens, the fair and the unfair, the sweet and the bitter, has a pedagogical purpose. Accepting that purpose is not weakness, it's spiritual intelligence. Seneca wrote, "Fate leads the willing and drags the unwilling." That is the invisible law that governs the soul of the wise. It's not that fate is cruel, it's that resistance makes it seem so. Those who accept with serenity turn wounds into doors. Those who resist turn doors into walls. Mature acceptance means opening your eyes even when the light hurts. Marcus Aurelius understood it with astonishing clarity. Love whatever happens to you, because that too was woven for you. It's not a command to love suffering, but to recognize that there is an unseen order in what seems chaotic, that even what wounds you today may one day become the cause of your transformation. Acceptance doesn't mean applauding what happens, it means ceasing to fight the inevitable. In daily life, this wisdom is tested constantly. A conversation that ends badly, a love that isn't returned, a project that fails. The natural reaction is rejection. This shouldn't have happened. But mature acceptance doesn't ask why, it asks what for. That single shift of focus turns pain into teacher. Epictetus said the key to serenity is to distinguish what depends on you from what doesn't. Accepting what doesn't depend on you doesn't mean indifference. It means redirecting energy toward what you can influence. Your attitude, your thoughts, your response. You can't control the wind, but you can adjust the sails. That's the metaphor of Stoic acceptance, sailing with intelligence instead of fighting the sea. Mature acceptance is not emotional coldness, it's love of truth. It's looking at life without makeup, without excuses, without drama. It's saying, this is what it is, and from here, I decide. That decision is the moment when suffering becomes strength, because clarity doesn't erase pain, but it makes it useful. Imagine someone losing something they love. Their mind resists, seeks explanations, blames themselves, blames others, blames fate or time. But then comes a moment when the soul, exhausted, surrenders to reality. And in that surrender, paradoxically, peace appears. Not because the pain has vanished, but because there is no more resistance. Acceptance doesn't heal the wound, but it stops the bleeding. Marcus Aurelius, who lost children, friends, and battles, realized that serenity comes not from changing the world, but from changing one's view of it. If something external pains you, it's not that which troubles you, but your judgment about it. The wise don't deny pain, they study it. They don't say, it doesn't affect me, they say, it doesn't control me. The difference is subtle, but decisive. Mature acceptance also has a moral face. To accept that others think differently doesn't mean giving up your truth, it means respecting theirs. Saying, "You have the right to think that way," is to recognize that the world doesn't revolve around your perspective. It's an act of intellectual humility and inner strength, because only those secure in themselves can stop needing agreement from everyone else. Epictetus warned, "Don't try to convince the foolish, teach by example." Accepting that you cannot change other minds is a sign of practical wisdom. Not everyone is ready to understand you, and that's fine. The Stoic doesn't impose their vision, they embody it. Because truth isn't preached, it's lived with serenity. Acceptance is not permitting injustice, it's acting from lucidity, not from anger. Mature acceptance doesn't paralyze, it clarifies. It lets you respond with precision instead of reacting with rage. When you accept that something hurts, you can repair it. But as long as you deny it, you only prolong it. Seneca advised viewing life as a stage where you don't choose the script, but you choose how to play your role. If the scene is tragic, play it with dignity. If it's comic, play it sincerely. The wise don't obsess over the role, they focus on performing it virtuously. That's the purest form of acceptance. Doing your best with what you have. The immature mind confuses acceptance with helplessness. But to accept is not to give up. It's to align with reality, to act effectively. Only when you accept the terrain can you play the game wisely. Those who complain about the field, the weather, or the referee have already lost. The Stoic doesn't complain, they adapt. And that adaptability, grounded in calm, is the source of their power. There is immense freedom in letting others think as they wish. You don't need to convince, correct, or defend yourself constantly. Mature acceptance means understanding that disagreement is not a threat, it's part of nature's order. Wanting everyone to understand you is vanity. Accepting that some won't is wisdom. Marcus Aurelius also wrote, "The universe is change, life is opinion. What pains you today may shape you tomorrow. What looks like loss may one day reveal direction." Mature acceptance is trusting that process even when you can't see the map. You don't need to know the whole path, only to take the next step with serenity. Epictetus reminded his students, "When something happens, just say, 'This is how nature willed it.' Not with resignation, but with reverence. Because the wise don't see coincidence, they see coherence. What happens, happens as it must. And the art of living is learning to move with that flow instead of making it your enemy. Acceptance isn't about not feeling, it's about not suffering for what you feel. It's allowing pain to pass through you without building an altar to its shadow. It's knowing you don't need to win every mental battle to be at peace. It's understanding that even if you can't control the world, you can always control your response. When you reach that point, something changes forever. External noise loses power. Criticism dissolves. Disappointments turn into lessons. You stop reacting, you start observing. The inevitable no longer exhausts you, because you've learned to see its place in the greater order. Mature acceptance doesn't promise instant happiness. It promises freedom. Freedom from drama, expectation, and control. And that freedom, once sustained, becomes peace. Not naive peace, but lucid peace. A peace that doesn't depend on the world's silence, but on your inner balance. Because in the end, acceptance isn't saying, "I like this." It's saying, "This is." And from that place, deciding how to live it with dignity. And when you can do that, when you can look at the world and say calmly, "You have the right to think that way. It was meant to happen this way. Not everything depends on me." Then you discover the most powerful secret of the Stoic soul. That true strength isn't resisting the flow of life, but moving with it without losing yourself. 10th Stoic principle: verbal detachment. Not everything I keep silent about hurts me. That sentence contains one of the hardest truths to practice. Not every silence is emptiness, and not every word is power. We live in an era where expression is mistaken for authenticity, where people believe that speaking always frees and silence always represses. But the wise know that poorly managed words are leaks of energy, that saying everything doesn't make you transparent, it makes you exposed. Mastery begins when you learn to discern what deserves voice and what deserves rest. Verbal detachment is not coldness, it is mastery. It's understanding that every spoken word has a cost, and that not everything is worth that price. Epictetus put it clearly: "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we may listen twice as much as we speak." The Stoic doesn't remain silent out of fear, but out of awareness. His silence isn't passivity, it's selection. He knows that not every truth must be voiced, and that sometimes the wisest word is the one left unsaid. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Waste no words on those who cannot receive them." That warning is more relevant than ever. How many times have you tried to explain your point, defend your intent, clear a misunderstanding only to end up exhausted and misinterpreted? Not because you were wrong, but because the other mind wasn't ready to understand. The wise don't waste themselves convincing others. They know that silence communicates, and often it communicates better. Verbal detachment is the art of releasing the need for a response. It's letting go of the chase for being understood. It's realizing that the value of your words doesn't depend on another's reaction, but on the purity of your intention. When you speak from serenity, even if you're not understood, your energy remains intact. When you speak from anxiety, even if you're right, you drain yourself. Seneca warned, "He who talks too much often harms his cause." Excessive speech comes from insecurity. Those who trust themselves don't need to fill the air. They speak little, but when they do, every phrase carries weight. Their voice doesn't seek to convince, but to resonate. And that difference separates the wise from the talkative. Verbal detachment also means not taking another's silence personally. The ego interprets silence as rejection, contempt, or coldness. But the mature mind knows that silence can mean respect, reflection, or simply space for the soul to process. Not everything left unsaid is indifference sometimes. Silence is the most honest way to protect what cannot yet be spoken without harm. The Stoic learns to read between words. He knows that real communication happens beyond sound. A gesture, a pause, a glance can hold more truth than 1,000 speeches. Verbal detachment is learning that subtle language, reacting not to tone but to intention, not to provocation but to the truth beneath the noise. Epictetus taught his students, "Don't argue with those who want to win, speak only with those who want to understand." It's useless to use words when the goal isn't comprehension but control. That's why the wise withdraw from ego-driven debates. They don't flee, they rise above. They know there's no victory in convincing the unwilling. Verbal detachment doesn't mean emotional distance, it means emotional mastery. It's not being a slave to the urge to have the last word. It's refusing to react to every comment, every critique, every provocation. Because a soul that reacts to everything isn't at peace, it's on guard. And living defensively is living exhausted. Seneca said, "Anger is a brief madness." In that verbal madness, friendships, love, opportunities, and respect are lost. A single uncontrolled word can undo years of calm. That's why the Stoic measures before speaking, not out of fear of being wrong, but because they value peace more than pride. Marcus Aurelius embodied this principle through hardship. As emperor, he endured betrayal, pressure, and constant criticism. Yet he preferred silence to reactive anger. He wrote, "Respond not to insult with insult. Let time be your argument. For the wise, time is the voice that never needs to shout." Verbal detachment is also an act of elegance. Those who don't feel the need to defend themselves prove that their worth doesn't depend on external approval. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's containment. The strong soul doesn't stay silent out of fear, but because it knows truth doesn't need endless repetition. It is stated once, then lived. When someone accuses you unjustly, provokes you, or judges, you remember this. Your reaction can be used against you, but your silence will protect you. The silence of the wise isn't cowardice, it's strategy. It's the refuge of a soul that knows not everything deserves an answer. Epictetus summed it up. You cannot control others' words, but you can control the echo they leave within you. That echo is your responsibility. Letting others' words enter you unfiltered creates chaos. Letting them pass like wind over water preserves your serenity. Verbal detachment also means releasing the compulsion to explain your limits, your decisions, your emotions. Those who respect you don't need justification. Those who don't won't understand it. Sometimes silence is the most powerful answer. It forces others to confront their own interpretations. Seneca taught that the wise man relies on his conscience, not the opinions of others. That includes speech. You don't need to prove you're right. You need to live so that your rightness is evident. Silent example holds a force no argument can match. Verbal detachment is also compassion. When you don't respond with anger, you not only save yourself, you give the other a mirror in which to see their own noise. Silence reflects. It returns what each person emits. That's why, in the face of provocation, the Stoic remains silent, not from indifference, but from understanding that every word from a wound becomes a weapon. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves crash, and it stands firm, while the fury of the water falls around it." Verbal detachment is that rock, the ability to withstand waves without becoming one. Practicing it is not easy. At first, silence hurts. The mind demands defense. Pride demands response. But if you resist that first impulse, something expands within you. You discover that you don't need to react to remain powerful. That strength isn't in noise, but in calm. That true superiority isn't proved by speech, but by serenity amid shouting. With time, verbal detachment becomes a habit. You learn to speak less, but better. To choose words that heal, not harm. To use silence as an instrument, not a prison. Each phrase spoken from calm weighs more than 100 thrown from anger. Each pause becomes a mark of emotional intelligence. Epictetus warned, "If every friction irritates you, how will you be polished?" Every provocation is a chance to practice verbal detachment. Every difficult conversation is training for the soul. And through that silent discipline, your mind grows stronger. The wise don't fear silence, they inhabit it. They turn it into space for observation and cleansing. In stillness, things arrange themselves. What needs to be said arises naturally, what doesn't dissolves. Silence ceases to be discomfort and becomes refuge. When you reach that point, you no longer seek to be right, you seek to be at peace. You no longer speak to affirm who you are. Your mere presence communicates it. Verbal detachment makes you a quiet force. Your words become few but essential. Your silences dense but full of meaning. Not everything I keep silent about hurts me means exactly that. I have learned to choose my battles, my words, and my silences. I no longer need to answer to prove my worth. Silence, far from emptiness, is the highest expression of inner mastery. And then something remarkable happens. The world starts listening more. Because those who don't speak from need, when they finally do, command the room. That is the invisible power of verbal detachment. It doesn't conquer with noise, but with presence. It doesn't impose, it radiates. It doesn't persuade, it inspires. And in a world where everyone fights to be heard, you will be remembered not for what you said, but for the calm with which you chose to remain silent. When silence becomes power, there comes a moment in life when you stop searching for formulas and start observing patterns. You discover that people don't fall in love with what you say, but with what you transmit when you say nothing. Words can captivate for a moment, but only sustained energy leaves a mark. Then you realize that the secret was never about learning to speak, it was about learning to be silent without disappearing, to be present without imposing, to communicate without needing approval. True attraction doesn't arise from strategy, but from balance. It's not about having the right phrases, but about having your soul in order. Calm has an invisible language that the world recognizes, even if it doesn't understand it. It's that tranquil gesture, that serene gaze, that way of breathing without anxiety that makes someone irresistible once they've made peace with themselves. The wise don't seduce, they inspire. They don't conquer, they reflect. They don't promise, they demonstrate. Their strength lies in what they don't need. That's why, when you become a person at peace, others feel drawn to your silence. They come closer, not because you seek them, but because they sense something in you that doesn't depend on them, your center. Epictetus knew it when he taught, "No one is free who depends on applause." Emotional independence is the root of human magnetism. The Stoic doesn't seek validation because his worth doesn't fluctuate with circumstance. He doesn't need to be understood to feel complete. And that self-sufficiency isn't arrogance, it's balance. It's the tranquility of someone who knows how to share without losing themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "Your power is in your mind, not in another's gaze." That sentence sums up the entire journey you've made to this point. Because what attracts isn't appearance, it's harmony. A calm mind illuminates the face, refines gestures, softens the voice. Those who master their inner noise become presence, and presence, in a world full of urgency, is luxury. What once drove you to control, you now observe with distance. You no longer fear silence, you dwell in it. You no longer insist, you flow. You no longer wait to be chosen, you choose. Detachment has stopped being a pose and become your natural way of existing. You've understood that mastery isn't hardness, it's softness without fear. That calm isn't coldness, it's love without dependence. People will perceive you differently. Some will feel drawn, others threatened, because serenity unsettles those who live off reaction. But that's the price of mastery. Losing shallow approval to gain deep respect. You are no longer part of the noise, you are the echo that remains when the noise ends. Seneca said, He who has a calm harbor within himself does not fear the storm. You've built that harbor with every boundary, every pause, every silence. You've stopped speaking to fill emptiness and started speaking only to expand truth. Your presence no longer seeks to be seen, it seeks to be useful. And at that point, when you no longer need to convince anyone, something miraculous happens. The world begins to truly listen. Because people trust those who don't chase them. They respect those who don't need them. They admire those who are at peace. Serenity becomes your signature, your invisible perfume, your way of conquering without touch. Life isn't about accumulating attention, it's about learning to sustain your own. About not losing yourself in the eyes that look at you or the ears that listen. About staying faithful to your center even when the world offers you 1,000 mirrors. Because in the end, everything you seek outside is a projection of what you haven't recognized within. Love, respect, admiration, they all come when you no longer need them. Not because the universe punishes desire, but because it rewards maturity. Calm is the soul's natural filter. It attracts what vibrates with it and repels what isn't ready to hold it. That's why, when you learn to stop begging, stop explaining, and simply exist with dignity, you begin to live in tune with what is yours, by frequency, not by force. Speak only if your words improve upon silence, taught Epictetus. Now you understand the full meaning of that phrase. Because you no longer seek to fill silence, you honor it. You no longer try to impress, you express with purpose. You no longer fear being misunderstood, because you know deep understanding cannot be demanded, it must be awakened. And if this journey has taught you anything, it's that a serene mind attracts more than an eloquent tongue, that a steady gaze impacts more than any speech, that a tranquil soul is recognized even from afar, because calm, when it's real, vibrates stronger than desire. So from now on, don't seek to be interesting, be integral. Don't try to impress, embody your principles. Don't fill silences, inhabit them. Because those who master their voice master their destiny, and those who master their silence master their soul. If something inside you felt relief while hearing these words, follow that impulse and follow us. Subscribing isn't a favor to this podcast. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It means you refuse to merely survive, that you're willing to think differently, to feel with more calm, to live with more intention. Do it now and share this message with those who need it. Because when one mind lights up, it inevitably lights another. And remember, words may attract, but only silence sustains. Your voice is essential here. Every reflection strengthens and elevates our community, reflecting the true value of each individual and contributing to our shared Stoic identity. The reflection that receives the most support will be set as the standard of this community of Stoic minds. A community that does not flee from pain but walks through it with courage, with wisdom, with honor. We will see each other in our next gathering at Stoicism for Winners, where we will continue exploring the riches of Stoic wisdom applied to modern life. Now, take the opportunity to deepen your Stoic practice with new recommended podcast sessions. Follow us so you don't miss any reflection that could help you at just the moment when everything feels overwhelming. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish episodes designed to accompany you when life feels heavy, when it's hard to stay calm, when you need a word to remind you who you are. Not following us is to risk missing exactly that lesson that could bring back the peace you have been seeking. Until we meet again, remember, you are the sole owner of your perception, the creator of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. This is the legacy of Stoicism, the art of being invincible.